The world was young then, wild, raw, and endlessly alive. The air shimmered beneath a relentless African sun, where endless grasslands stretched beyond sight and ancient winds carried the scent of dust, rain, and fear. Herds of colossal elephants rumbled across the horizon, shaking the ground like distant thunder. Giant antelopes grazed near rivers carved from silver light, while predators, silent, patient, waited in the shade of acacia trees. This was Earth 1.6 million years ago, a stage of survival where nature wrote its stories in tooth, claw, and bone. And somewhere within this living chaos, a new kind of creature emerged, fragile, barefoot, yet unlike any other. Early humans, Homo ergaster. Their eyes burned with curiosity, their hands shaped stone into purpose, and their minds carried the first flickers of imagination. They did not yet rule this land. They barely survived it. For them, every sunrise was a gamble, every shadow a possible death. Imagine standing there, unarmed, unprotected, as the sound of breaking branches echoes through the tall grass. Was it the wind, or the approach of a saber-tooth, its golden eyes fixed on you from the darkness? To live here was to exist in a constant dance with extinction. And yet, these primitive hunters adapted. They learned to move as one, to read the whispers of the wild, to anticipate danger before it struck. They were not just surviving. They were becoming something greater. Each heartbeat carried the rhythm of humanity's. First story. Courage born from fear. Strength forged through struggle. From the edge of the savannah, they looked toward the unknown and took their first steps into history. Theirs was a life without comfort, but with meaning carved into every breath. Now, take a moment to imagine you were there, watching those first humans learn to fight, to run, to endure. Would you have survived in their world, or become part of its silence? If this glimpse into humanity's dawn makes your heart race, hit the like button to step deeper into prehistory, and drop a comment. Would you dare to walk among them? The savannah did not belong to humans. It never had. Long before mankind dreamed of dominance, the true rulers stalked in silence, cloaked by golden grass and shadows. To the early hunters, the greatest terror was not the storm or the darkness. It was the moment when everything went quiet. Hidden behind the veil of acacia branches, the great cats of the Pleistocene waited. Among them was Dinophilis, the terrible cat, a muscular predator heavier than a leopard, but built with the killing precision of a lion. Its fangs, curved and dagger-like, were not meant for intimidation. They were meant to pierce skulls. For Homo ergaster, a single mistake meant the difference between a heartbeat and nothing at all. Every movement mattered, the flick of a tail, the snap of a twig. When the air shifted and the birds suddenly vanished into the sky, the early humans froze, every instinct screaming the same. Ancient warning, you are being hunted. To them, these predators were ghosts, seen only in the final instant when the grass parted and death came roaring forward. Even the great rivers offered no refuge. At dusk, lions larger than any today prowled the banks, their paws silent against the dust. Cheetahs faster than thought darted after fleeing gazelles, and beyond the tree line, the shadows of Meganterion, the saber-tooth's smaller cousin, moved with uncanny grace, hunting in pairs, striking without sound. For primitive humans, survival meant observation. They began to learn the habits of their predators, when lions rested, where leopards dragged their kills, how to track and avoid danger before it struck. These lessons were not passed in words, but in scars. Fear became their first teacher, and perhaps their most loyal one. At night they gathered on rocky outcrops, eyes wide and unblinking, listening to the distant chorus of roars and screams echoing across the plains. Somewhere out there, a hunt was unfolding. Somewhere out there, another clan would not see morning. Yet, through fear, something remarkable began to stir. The hunters started to think differently. They began to predict, to anticipate, to plan. In the endless balance of predator and prey, humans were still the fragile ones. but not for long. Their minds, sharper than claws, had started to evolve a new kind of weapon, strategy, and with it the first seeds of dominance were quietly taking root beneath the African stars. The turning point came not through strength, but through unity. In a world where solitary hunters perished and predators ruled the plains, survival demanded something entirely new: cooperation. Among the early Homo ergaster, the idea of the group, of moving, thinking, and fighting as one, was beginning to take shape. It was the dawn of strategy, born not from luxury, but from desperation. At first, it was instinct, a shout to warn of danger, a shared glance before a hunt. Gradually, these moments became patterns. Rituals of survival passed through generations. The hunters learned that while one pair of eyes could miss the glint of a predator's fur, 10 could not. While one arm could not bring down a beast, 20 could drive it into an ambush. The savannah had forced them to evolve not just physically, but socially. Picture a small band of early humans moving across the morning fog. They form a crescent around a grazing antelope, each step silent, deliberate. The leader signals with a gesture, no words, no sound, and the group closes in. Stones fly. The animal stumbles. Victory. It is not just food that is won that day. It is the birth of coordination, of teamwork, of intelligence sharpened by necessity. Around flickering fires, they began to reenact these hunts with movement and sound, perhaps the first stories ever told. Through mimicry, they passed on tactics. Through sound, they learned to anticipate. Slowly, a rhythm of communication was emerging, primitive, yet powerful. It was not language as we know it, but it was the foundation of something greater, the ability to think together. As generations passed, this instinct for collaboration became their greatest weapon. They could now defend territory, warn of predators, and share the spoils of the hunt. While the claws of lions tore through flesh, humans had discovered something far more enduring: the strength of connection. Yet even with newfound strategy, the world remained merciless. For every successful hunt, there were nights of silence and loss. But through every trial, one truth grew clearer: the path to survival was not walked alone. From the flicker of these early alliances, humanity's first societies were forming. And soon, a discovery would ignite the darkness itself, transforming not only their nights, but their destiny forever. For countless generations, night had been the enemy. When the sun fell, the world belonged to predators, their roars echoing across the plains, their eyes glinting like embers in the black. Humans huddled together in silence, relying on the fragile comfort of numbers, hearts pounding as shadows crept ever closer. But one night, something extraordinary happened. A spark caught flame, and for the first time, the darkness retreated. No one knows which clan first tamed it. Perhaps it began with a lightning strike that set dry grass ablaze. Perhaps a fallen tree burned after a storm, and a curious hunter reached too close. But that moment, when trembling hands protected the first living flame, changed the fate of our species forever. Fire became more than warmth. It was a shield, a weapon, and a symbol of dominion. Imagine those first nights, the fire crackling, pushing back the cold wind. Predators circled but dared not cross the ring of light. For the first time, early humans slept without fear of unseen eyes watching from the tall grass. They could cook food, strengthening their bodies. They could gather after sunset, faces glowing, orange, exchanging sounds, gestures, ideas. Around those fires, something else ignited: imagination. The flame reshaped everything it touched. With it came exploration, movement, and courage. The hunters could travel farther, stay longer, defend their young. They could harden wooden spears in the heat and ward off even the mightiest cats. The balance of power was shifting. The hunted were learning to control their fate. But fire was more than survival. It was identity. It drew people together. It illuminated not just the savannah, but the human mind. For the first time, They were no longer at the mercy of the night. They commanded it. Now imagine standing at the edge of that ancient circle, feeling the warmth of the first flame to ever burn for human hands. Would you have reached out to touch it, or feared it as the others did? If this moment fascinates you, hit the like button and tell me in the comments. Would you have been brave enough to master fire, or would you have watched it from, the shadows? The plains trembled beneath their weight. Towering shadows moved across the horizon. Massive silhouettes of mammoths, primitive elephants, and colossal rhinoceroses. These were not creatures to be trifled with. They were walking fortresses of flesh and bone. To the early hunters, they were both opportunity and terror, a living promise of meat, hide, and bone, but also of death if misjudged. When the wind shifted, you could hear them, deep, thunderous bellows rolling through the savanna, shaking the air. A single step could crush a man, yet hunger was stronger than fear. As seasons grew harsh and smaller prey became scarce, the hunters' eyes turned toward the giants. The question was never if they could kill one, but if they could survive trying. They watched from afar, learning. The matriarchs of the ancient elephants guarded their young with vigilance, encircling them in living walls of tusks. Giant hippos, half submerged, charged at the scent of intrusion. Even herbivores could kill with horrifying efficiency. And yet, through observation, humans found moments of weakness. The old, the injured, the isolated, these became the targets of their ambition. To hunt such beasts required coordination unlike anything before. Groups would drive a herd toward ravines or swamps, where one might stumble and fall. Then came the rush, stones, spears hardened by fire, and screams echoing against the chaos. Blood met dust. Victory was costly, but the reward was monumental. For days the clan would feast, craft tools from bone, and use the hide for shelter. A single kill could sustain life for weeks. Still, the lesson was never forgotten. Nature gave nothing freely. For every triumph, the land demanded respect. Standing beside the fallen titan, early humans saw themselves reflected in its still eyes, small, fragile, yet capable of overcoming the impossible. It was not just survival, it was transformation. In the shadow of these giants, humanity's spirit grew stronger. They began to see the world not as a series of threats, but as a puzzle to be solved, an endless test of courage and intelligence. And soon, what began as survival would evolve into something even more powerful: community. When the hunt ended and the dust settled, survival no longer depended solely on who was strongest, but on who could stand together. The ancient plains were not kind to solitude. Alone, a hunter could not defend against predators or find food in lean seasons. But, united, sharing labor, danger, and discovery, the clan became something more than a group of survivors. It became a force. At dusk, they gathered around firelight, the echoes of the savanna blending with the crackle of burning wood. The day's catch was divided, carefully and deliberately. There was order in this chaos, an unwritten code forming before language itself. Each person had a role: hunters, gatherers, firekeepers, watchers. Through cooperation, they learned stability. Through shared purpose, they found identity. This instinct to work as one was more than survival strategy. It was evolution in motion. When a lion's roar split the night, the clan reacted as a single organism. Some tending the fire, others guarding the children, their eyes scanning the horizon. Fear was no longer paralyzing. It became coordination. The bond between them was invisible yet stronger than any weapon they could wield. Food, warmth, and stories were shared under the stars. In those moments of silence, between the wind and the fire, they began to sense something new, a belonging that transcended the individual. It was empathy, the first whisper of what would one day become compassion. To help another was to help oneself, for the survival of one meant the survival of all. The young watched the elders sharpen tools, mimicking their movements. They learned not just how to hunt, but how to protect, how to remember, how to lead. With every generation, Knowledge was passed through gestures, rhythms, and traditions. Slowly, humanity was learning to build memory, not of bloodlines, but of culture. The clan was now more than a reaction to danger. It was the first spark of civilization, a living network of trust, teaching, and sacrifice. And yet, even with unity, the wild remained unforgiving. Nature demanded respect, and sometimes it claimed what it had given. For when courage turned to carelessness, the savannah reminded them of their fragile place in its order. Ahead, the next challenge would test that unity like never before. Because in a world still ruled by predators, even the most careful hunter could make one fatal mistake and become prey once again. The savannah was not merciful to the careless. Every dawn promised both life and death, and often the two arrived together. Among the early humans, bravery was essential, but recklessness was fatal. The world they walked was filled with traps laid not by intention, but by nature itself. A single mistake, a single step too far from the group, could mean vanishing into the tall grass forever. Imagine a young hunter, eager to prove himself. The air is heavy, the ground warm beneath his feet. He spots movement in the distance, an antelope grazing alone. Opportunity. He signals no one, convinced he can handle it. The others are miles away, tending the fire. He crouches, heart pounding, stone-tipped spear ready. But what he doesn't see is the flicker of a tail behind him, low and deliberate. The grass stirs. Silence. Then, a blur of muscle and claws. Moments later, the savannah swallows another life. Only the echo of a scream remains. Such stories were not rare. They were the pulse of that world. Predators hunted with patience. The great cats learned human patterns, where they drank, when they hunted, how they moved. Hyenas shadowed the edges of camps, waiting for exhaustion or hunger to lower defenses. Even rivers carried danger. Crocodiles lurked where thirst met temptation. For the untested, every mistake had a consequence written in blood. But from these losses came learning. The clans began to understand that vigilance was survival. They placed watchers near camp perimeters, armed with burning branches. They studied the behavior of predators, the timing of their hunts, the direction of their tracks. The world was teaching them through pain, and humanity was listening. Fear became not weakness, but wisdom. Each tragedy left behind a lesson that shaped the species itself. The young who survived grew. The cautious became leaders, and the leaders carried the weight of memory. Step by step, instinct transformed into knowledge. Even so, the savannah never ceased to demand its toll. The early humans learned that to live here was to respect the balance between courage and caution. For in this realm, the line separating hunter from prey was as thin as a heartbeat. Now imagine yourself standing in that world, weapon in hand, the night closing in, the wind whispering through the grass. Would you face the darkness alone, or wait for your clan to stand beside you? Share your thoughts in the comments. Would you risk it all for one chance to prove yourself, or would you wait for the safety of the firelight? It began with a spark, not of fire this time, but of thought. A hand gripping stone, a strike against another, and the sound of progress echoing through the ages. The first tools were not crafted in comfort, but in desperation. Every chipped edge represented a victory over the impossible, a defiance of nature's indifference. With each fracture, early humans were shaping not just stone, but their destiny. Picture a lone figure beneath a pale dawn sky, crouched near a riverbank. He studies a rock, turning it slowly, eyes narrowing as his mind begins to see what nature did not intend. Purpose. The blow comes swift and deliberate. Sparks jump, flakes fall, and from raw chaos emerges form. A sharp blade, a point, a tool. For the first time, humanity holds in its hands the power to alter the world. These tools were more than weapons. They were extensions of thought. A sharpened hand axe could butcher an animal faster, carve wood, or defend against predators. The difference between hunter and hunted began to shift. Every strike of stone against stone was an experiment, every new shape a discovery. The savanna had forced the human mind into motion, and there was no turning back. Across generations, the craft spread. Clans shared techniques, perfecting balance and edge. The rhythm of hammering stone became the soundtrack of evolution. They no longer relied solely on instinct, they relied on invention. With tools, they could shape bones into needles, dig deeper for roots, and prepare hides for shelter. Innovation was becoming their greatest adaptation, but perhaps the most profound change was unseen. For the first time, humans could plan. They could imagine the result before it existed. A chipped core was no longer just a rock, it was a vision made real. In that moment, the human mind crossed an invisible threshold, one that no other creature had ever reached. The landscape still belonged to beasts, but the balance was shifting. The claws and fangs of predators were ancient gifts of nature. The blade of stone was humanity's answer, a gift of the mind. And as the sun set over the ancient plains, the echoes of flint striking flint carried through the air, announcing quietly but clearly, a new kind of power had arrived. For countless ages, survival had been a reflex. Eat, flee, hide, endure. But something was changing within those early hunters, something silent, yet monumental. Beneath the surface of instinct, the first sparks of awareness began to glow. They were starting to think not only of what was, but of what could be. Fear became calculation. Hunger became motivation. The mind was awakening. At night, as firelight flickered across their faces, they no longer stared into the flames with blank eyes. They began to wonder. The world around them, its dangers, its patterns, was no longer just background noise. It was a puzzle to be understood. When lightning split the sky, when predators howled in the distance, they felt more than terror. They felt curiosity. That curiosity was the seed of everything to come. A hunter crouched by a river might now hesitate before stepping forward, not from fear alone, but from foresight. He imagined what could happen, weighing outcomes in his mind. Another, watching her child sleep, might plan where to travel when the rains returned. For the first time, thought extended beyond the moment. The future had entered the human mind. Awareness brought both wonder and burden. The same minds that learned to predict danger also began to recognize loss. Death was no longer a simple vanishing, it was absence. The fallen left behind memories, echoes of laughter around the fire. This realization deepened their bonds, gave meaning to their rituals, and perhaps inspired the first gestures of respect toward the dead. The mind had awakened to both creation and sorrow. Through awareness came imagination, and through imagination came vision. The early humans began to paint their world not with color, but with understanding. They shaped tools with precision, tracked stars without knowing their names, and recognized patterns in migration and season. In their awakening, they had found the blueprint of intelligence itself. The savanna still roared, filled with predators and peril. But something had shifted forever. These once fragile beings were no longer just part of nature's rhythm. They were beginning to compose their own. And soon, with their minds fully alive, they would step into the future not as prey, but as architects of their own fate. The sun rises over a landscape long vanished, its light stretching across a world that forged the first humans. Every tree, every predator, every stone bears the memory of their struggle. For 1.6 million years, life tested them, shaping their minds, tempering their courage, and igniting the spirit that would one day build civilizations. What began as survival became something far greater, the birth of humanity. On those endless plains, Homo ergaster stood where no creature had before, between instinct and awareness, between fear and understanding. They had learned to hunt together, to wield fire, to carve tools from unyielding rock. But more than anything, they learned to imagine. In that imagination lay the seed of everything that followed: language, art, belief, and the will to dream beyond the horizon. Every scar told a story. Every hunt, every loss, every spark of flame added a verse to the grand narrative of existence. Their legacy was not written in words, but in endurance. The first humans were never kings of their world. They were its apprentices, learning each lesson carved by tooth and claw. And yet, through perseverance, they transformed fragility into power. The predators that once hunted them are gone, their roars lost to time. The rivers that once swallowed their footprints have long since changed course. But the spirit that carried them, the relentless drive to explore, adapt, and survive, still burns within us. Each tool we build, each challenge we overcome, is an echo of those ancient hearts beating against the dark. Close your eyes and picture them for a moment. A small group gathered around the fire, faces painted in flickering gold, unaware that they are shaping the future of an entire species. Their laughter mingles with the night wind. Above them, the stars gleam cold and eternal, the same stars that watch over us now. From the courage of those first survivors, we inherited not just life, but meaning. The fire they tamed still burns in our cities, our technology, and our dreams. We are their legacy, their continuation, their answer to the question of what it means to endure. And as their story fades into the ancient dawn, one truth remains timeless. The moment humanity first looked into the darkness and chose to fight back was the moment the world changed forever.